Welcome to another public live stream session. And man, do we have a lot to talk about. And let's discuss the 401k and how it's helped me achieve financial independence and retire early a lot sooner than I originally projected. But first, I want to say thank you to all the subscribers because last week I hit 10,000 subscribers. And just a year ago, I only had 700 subscribers. And I don't consider myself an influencer because I really hate that word, but I consider myself more of an educator. And when I publish a video about the 401k, HSA, Roth IRA, and early retirement strategies, even just that one person watching my video means that I made a difference, right? Now I'm going to continue to provide absolutely free financial education because it should be free. And my family and I celebrated last week when I hit 10,000 subscribers. And the next celebration is when I hit 100,000 subscribers and when I get that YouTube plaque. So anyway, I started maxing out my 401k contributions in 2017. And that was the same year I began my financial independence journey. And if you're brand new to my channel, I've made hundreds of videos on how to achieve financial independence and retire early. And I plan to retire early by the age of 45 in the year 2031. And I get to plan for early retirement because I've been maxing out my 401k contributions every single year, along with my HSA, Roth IRA, and taxable investment account for dividend and growth investing. And I have a comprehensive early retirement strategy with my 401k and other investment vehicles. So I know how my investment assets grow every single year. Now you can even go back to my first live stream when I talked about the early retirement strategy. But like many people, I didn't start maximizing my 401k contributions until 2017 because I had an enormous amount of debt from 2013 to 2016. And it took me exactly 2 years to pay off $110,000 in consumer debt. Like many Americans, I had $42,000 in 2 car loans, $11,000 in a 401k loan, $8,800 in a personal loan, and $47,000 in total credit card debt. And once I paid off my debt, it took me another 5 months to fully fund my emergency fund in a high yield savings account. And I'm going to make a separate live stream about how I paid off my debt. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't done that already. But the bottom line is that you can't truly start investing in financial independence or early retirement until you clean up your liabilities. And back in 2015, it was impossible for me to max out my 401k, Roth IRA, or HSA contributions with a $700 car payment, $500 credit card payments, and $250 a month in personal loans. The only debt I have now is my primary mortgage from the house I purchased back in 2014 with a 2.9% 30-year mortgage rate. But I didn't get to where I am now without making a sacrifice for 2 years to pay off that enormous amount of debt that I personally accumulated. And if you're in debt, like I once was, the most important thing you need to do is take responsibility for the debt that you took out and then start tackling it like a maniac. And the journey is long, but you're going to appreciate yourself later on and never look back at them. But anyway, for today's public live stream, I'm going to go over the 10 questions you need to ask your employer or the HR department to find out what type of 401k your employer offers. Not every employer offers the Roth option or an employer match. Some employers offer the after-tax contribution, which can significantly grow your retirement assets. Some 401ks have restrictions on how often you can change your investments. And the second thing I'm going to go over is how to decide whether a traditional 401k or a Roth 401k is right for you. And another thing I'll go over is the 401k after-tax contribution or the mega backdoor Roth. This is especially helpful for people who make multiple 6 figures in income every year. And the fourth thing I'm going to go over is the 401k calculator by age, which you can download for absolutely free by visiting firesightchat.com/resources. And the last thing I'm going to go over is how to decide whether you should leave your money in your 401k or have it rolled over to an IRA after you leave a job. If you're watching this live, I really appreciate you guys being here. And if you're watching this on replay, I still appreciate you watching this on replay, but you're going to see timestamps. So feel free to skip ahead if you need to. Okay. And if you look at this diagram, it's one of our top 6 retirement accounts, along with 401k, Roth IRA, and HSA. My wife has her own Roth IRA and HSA, and I have my own as well. And I say this in every live stream. It's not that we don't like to combine our financial accounts, but the IRS actually doesn't allow us to combine our IRAs, HSAs, 401ks, or any type of retirement accounts. Each of the accounts I mentioned has to be assigned to an individual social security number. And to simplify our long-term investment strategy, we have our TSP, 401k, Roth IRA, and HSA as a part of our investments, right? Those are going to be completely separate from the pensions that we're going to collect starting at age 62. And that's assuming that Social Security will still be around. But we're going to have my military pension starting at age 58 for serving in the reserve with some active duty time. Social Security retirement pension, hopefully at age 62. Federal pension at age 62, and the state pension at age 55. The ideal situation is that we make $100,000 a year just in retirement pensions starting at age 62 and take some money out of our retirement to travel the world, live in different countries throughout the year, and purchase more assets, right? And here's how we prioritize our investments. Our number one priority is to get the employer match with the 401k. Once we get the employer match, then I move on to the HSA and contribute up to the maximum, which is $7,750 for family coverage or $3,850 for individuals in the year 2023. If you're 55 or older, you can contribute an additional $1,000 to your HSA. The next one is our Roth IRA, which is $6,500 each for me and my wife, so a total of $13,000. After we max out our Roth IRA and HSA, then we go back to our 401k to maximize the rest of the contribution. The maximum personal contribution limit is $22,500 for the year 2023. Then we move on to the taxable investment accounts for our early retirement. And one fun fact I haven't mentioned before is the after-tax contribution in the 401k. If your employer offers the after-tax contribution, you can actually contribute up to $66,000 between you and your employer if you're under the age of 50, or $73,500 if you're over the age of 50. And I did this with my previous employer, and I'm really glad that I did it because I felt so behind on my retirement when I paid off my debt back in 2016. But I'm going to talk more about this strategy later on in this live stream. So these 10 questions you need to ask your employer about your 401k plan could help you understand and strategize your retirement investments. Question number 1, what brokerage company primarily manages your 401k? You'd be surprised to learn that some 401ks are managed by 2 brokers. My previous employer actually had Vanguard managing my core 401k, but they had TD Ameritrade managing my self-directed 401k. It was a weird scenario, but that's whom my employer had contracts with to have my 401k managed. And let me show you how a 401k generally works. Every employer that provides a 401k comes with a traditional 401k. It's going to be directly deducted from your gross income before you pay any federal or state income taxes. And when you retire, you're going to pay federal and state income taxes on the distributions. If your employer provides a match to your contribution, the money that comes directly from your employer goes to the traditional portion of your 401k, unless you elect to pay taxes now on the employer contribution, which will go to the Roth portion of the 401k. The Roth employer contribution is a new law that got passed in late 2022. If your employer offers the Roth 401k, then the contribution comes directly from your paycheck, but in after-tax dollars, which means that you'll pay federal and state income taxes now so that you don't pay any taxes later. And whether you do traditional 401k or Roth 401k, your contributions will go directly from your paychecks to the core investments. And that could be your target date retirement funds or other actively managed mutual funds. And some employers, like my previous employer, will offer what's called a 401k self-directed investment account for seasoned investors like me. The general rule is that you have to keep a minimum of 10% of your 401k in core investment, and you can invest up to 90% of your 401k in a self-directed investment. My core investments were managed by Vanguard, and my self-directed investment was managed by TD Ameritrade. What's really awesome is that I could invest in individual stocks and ETFs under the self-directed brokerage account. And I invested in Tesla in 2017. And I'm sure you know how much Tesla has grown over the years. And obviously, this is not in any form of personalized financial advice. Anyway, and the next question I want you to ask your employer is if they offer a Roth 401k. And there are companies that still do not offer Roth for some reason. I just think that they're just behind the times. And because if you take a look at this chart here, and having just a traditional 401k means that you're going to have taxable distributions when you start collecting your 401k at age 55 under the rule of 55. And I did a video on that a few months ago, and you can check that video out on my YouTube page. But if you don't make any 401k distributions at age 55 or 59 and a half, the IRS is going to assign you what's called a required minimum distribution, or RMD, for the traditional 401k, because the government doesn't want you to hold on to your tax deferred 401k forever. And they want you to pay your taxes at some point in your life, right? So the latest RMDs that came out, I believe, I'm going to talk about that later on, but they're between ages 70 and 75. So make sure to check out the IRS table for your required minimum distribution age. But the Roth 401k gives you tax-free distributions, and it doesn't come with the RMD like traditional 401k does, because you already pay taxes on the contributions. My contributions go to Roth because I believe my taxes will be higher in retirement, which I'll talk more about that in the next segment of this live stream. And the next question I want you to ask your employer is if they offer a match to your contribution. Having an employer match could make a huge difference to the growth of your 401k. For example, let's say your employer gives you a 100% match if you contribute 5% of your gross income. And I'm just going to call that $500 per every month, which is $6,000 a year. With a 2% annual increase in income, you would have $747,000 just in the employer contributions with a 7% average annual return. So think of it this way. If you're contributing $6,000 this year, and your employer contributes $6,000. That's $1.5 million in 30 years. And I'm going to show you the 401k calculator later on in this live stream. But if you can't wait that long, just go to firesightchat.com/resources to download your absolutely free 401k calculator. And the next question you need to ask is how long it takes to have your employer match completely vested. Okay. So let me go back to this 401k chart here. Like I said earlier, with the new 401k law in 2023, you can elect to put your employer match in either the traditional or Roth portion of your 401k. But you have to keep in mind that if you've only been with your employer for less than 3 years, which is the pretty generic rule for most 401k employers, your total balance of your 401k isn't necessarily all yours just yet. So for example, if you had $50,000 total in your 401k, of that $50,000, $40,000 is your personal contribution and $10,000 is your employer contribution. That $10,000 is not completely yours until you work with the employer for at least a certain amount of time. The most common vesting schedule I've seen is right here. Okay. If you quit your job in less than a year, you don't get to keep any of the employer contribution. If you quit between 1 and 2 years with your employer, you get to keep about 50% of the employer contributions. And if you quit between years 2 and 3, you get to keep 75% of the employer contributions. And if you quit after working 3 years with your employer, then you get to keep 100% of the employer contributions. So you can't just take the company's employer match and then run off to another company. They want you to contribute your time to the employer before you can take your portion of the employer match. And the vesting schedule can be different from company to company. the broker that manages your 401k will keep the employer match in a separate pot of money. And if you log into your 401k website, it's going to tell you how much you contributed and how much your company contributed so far. So make sure to contact your HR to find out your vesting schedule if you don't know, okay? And the next question you need to know is how often you get paid. And I know it sounds like a simple question, but how often you get paid is how frequently you get to contribute to your 401k. And if you're planning to maximize your 401k contribution like me, you should know that the maximum personal contribution limit for the year 2023 is $22,500 if you're under the age of 50. And if you're over the age of 50, your maximum contribution limit is $30,000. Your employer contribution does not count towards your personal contributions. So if your employer contributes $5,000, that's on top of the $22,500 or $30,000 that you personally contributed. But you want to make sure that you don't over contribute to the maximum personal contribution limit, or you're going to be penalized by the IRS. And the next 5 questions are more for the investment side of the house. And one of the questions is finding out the 401k core investment options. They can be actively managed mutual funds, target date retirement funds, or passively managed mutual funds. And the next question is if the 401k comes with a self-directed brokerage option. Remember, I talked about it earlier when I got to invest in individual stocks and ETFs by just keeping 10% in the core funds and 90% in my self-directed funds. If you know your way around the stock market, this is a great option to have for your 401k. But if you don't consider yourself like an expert, then I wouldn't worry about the self-directed brokerage account until you become more familiar with the 401k itself. The next question is how often you can allocate your investments. Some 401k plans only allow you to reallocate your money once per month or twice a month. And I don't reallocate my 401k investments that much, even during the bear market, only because I'm still 23 years away from reaching 59 and a half. And if you're in your 50s or late 50s, this is very useful information to find out how often you can allocate between stocks, bonds, and cash reserves. The next question you want to ask is how much money and fees your 401k is going to charge you. And this is more of a question with the brokerage company like Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, or whoever you have your 401k with. They could charge you the management fee, which is the fee you have to pay annually to keep your 401k open. There's also the expense ratio for each mutual fund that you invest your 401k money in. And I want to explain this as simply as I can, okay? So for example, your 401k plan charges you what's called a plan provider fee. And that could be anywhere between 0.5% and 2%, depending on the number of people participating in your employer's 401k plan. So what that means is it could be the size of your company and how many employees you have, okay? And my previous employer's 401k with Vanguard charged exactly 1% in management fees annually. So they charged me $1 for every $100 I have invested in the 401k. Under the 401k plan, you're most likely going to have mutual funds with stocks, bonds, and cash reserves. So if you have a mutual fund that tracks equities and another mutual fund that tracks bonds, you're going to have to pay the operating expenses for each of the mutual funds that you own. And the operating expenses depend on the type of mutual fund you buy, right? And if it's actively managed mutual funds, they could charge you anywhere between 0.5% and 2% in the annual expense ratio. And if you buy an index fund, then it's pretty dirt cheap. And that's like anywhere between 0.04% and 0.25%. And after you pay your 401k plan provider fee and operating expenses fees with the mutual funds, your net profit is how much you make in return annually. So if you made a 10% gross return in 2023, the 401k plan charges you 1% and the mutual funds collectively charge you another 1%, then your net return would be 8%. Makes sense, right? And the next question you want to ask is how the core 401k mutual funds have performed in the last 5 years, 10 years, and since inception. I typically like a mutual fund with a 10-year track record. Your 401k core plan will likely have specific mutual funds that your employer chose for you to invest in. And you can always talk to the fund manager with the brokerage company to find out how the funds have performed in the past and how you should allocate your assets based on your age and risk tolerance. And I'm not going to tell you how to diversify your investments because everyone's financial situation is different. Nor should you ever listen to someone other than a licensed financial advisor who tells you how to invest in your 401k. But you should at least know how these 401k mutual funds have performed in the past. Okay. And 401k can be expensive with a plan, provider fee, management fees, and brokerage fees. To me, a mutual fund performing a 7% average annual return with a 2% management and operating expenses means that I'm making a 5% annual net return. If you don't know what you're doing, your 401k could grow a lot slower than what you anticipated. This is why you need to have a solid understanding of how a 401k works. And I don't expect you to become a stock market expert, but you should at least know how much they're charging you in expenses and how the mutual funds have performed in the past 5, 10, or 20 years. And if you still need help with financial education, specifically in the 401k, I encourage you to schedule a complimentary coaching session by visiting firestarchat.com/coaching. And I can't tell you what you should invest in, but I can teach you what information you need to find and how to find them. So what's better, Roth 401k or traditional 401k? I want to show you this simple comparison chart so that you have a solid understanding of the differences between a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k, just so that we're on the same page. The personal contribution limit is $22,500 for traditional or Roth 401k. Now you can do a combination of both traditional and Roth, and as long as you don't exceed $22,500 if you're under the age of 50. And if you're over the age of 50, you get an extra $7,500 in catch-up contribution, or a total of $30,000 in the year 2023. Your paychecks and employer matches can go to either traditional or Roth 401k, depending on what you elect to contribute to. The new law states that you can actually put your employer matches in the Roth portion of the 401k as long as you pay taxes upfront. And a traditional 401k is used to make contributions with your pre-tax dollars, right? So it's the dollars before federal and state income taxes are taken out. A Roth 401k is used to make contributions with your after-tax dollars. So it's the dollars after the taxes are taken out. And if you retire at the age of 55, you can actually withdraw from your traditional 401k penalty-free, but you will owe taxes on the distributions. This is also called the rule of 55 if you work until age 55. It doesn't matter if you got fired, laid off, or quit your job. As long as you work until age 55, you can withdraw from your 401k penalty-free. And if you wait until you're 59 and a half to take distributions from your traditional 401k, the same rules still apply with no penalties, but you still owe federal and state income taxes, right? But again, your distributions will still be taxed, again, because you made pre-tax contributions. Basically, you're paying taxes on the back end. And every traditional 401k comes with a what's called a required minimum distribution, okay, or the RMD. You can't shelter your pre-tax money in your traditional 401k forever because the U.S. government wants you to pay your fair share in taxes. You'll need to Google the IRS RMD web table to find out the maximum age you can hold your traditional 401k before you have to start making distributions. And when it comes to the Roth 401k distributions, the rules are a lot different from the traditional 401k because you already pay taxes on your contributions. So you'll need to segregate your personal contributions and the earnings and interest that accrued inside your Roth 401k. If you retire at the age of 55, you're not going to be penalized on the earnings, but you will be taxed on the earnings. If you wait until you turn 59 and a half, then you don't get taxed or penalized on the distributions, which includes your earnings, interest, and personal contributions. There are also no required minimum distributions for the 401k because you already pay taxes on the contributions. So you could hold on to your Roth 401k for the rest of your life if you want to. So the bottom line is that if you withdraw money from a traditional 401k before you turn 55, you're going to owe a 10% penalty and ordinary income tax on the entire distribution. If you withdraw money from a Roth 401k before you turn 55, you're going to owe a 10% penalty and ordinary income tax only on the earnings and interest that accrued inside your Roth 401k, but not on the contributions you made because you already paid taxes on them. Makes sense so far, right? However, the rule of 55 for a Roth 401k is a lot different from a traditional 401k because you can't just choose to take out the Roth contribution inside your 401k early. There's a thing called a pro rata rule that will apply to your early withdrawal. So let me give you an example here. Let's say you have $500,000 total investing in your Roth 401k account. And out of that $500,000, you contributed $200,000 in Roth or after-tax dollars. And $300,000 of that is in interest and earnings. So you have 40% in Roth contribution and 60% in earnings and interest, right? If you need to find out how much earnings you accrued, you just find your total cost basis and subtract it from the total amount. You may just have $100,000 right now in your 401k with a cost basis of $70,000 in earnings and interest of $30,000. So that would be a 70-30 in total 401k portfolio, right? But anyway, let's say you want to retire at the age of 55 under the rule of 55. Since this example shows 40% Roth and 60% earnings, if you withdraw $10,000 early, $4,000 of that would be tax-free because that's your Roth contributions. But $6,000 of that would be taxed by the IRS under the ordinary income tax. If your marginal tax rate is at 24%, you will owe $1,440 on your income tax out of that $6,000 in earnings and interest. I am not planning to withdraw early from my Roth 401k because the penalty and taxes, even with the pro rata rule, would be too much, right? The other thing I want you to keep in mind is the required minimum distributions, or the RMD. The Secure Act 2.0 President Biden signed in 2022 removed the RMD for Roth 401k. For the traditional 401k, Congress increased the mandatory withdrawal age from 72 to 75 starting in 2033. And the RMD is now 73, which starting in 2023. And then it's going up to 75 on January 1st, 2033. If you're already 72 years old in 2022, you will have to start taking minimum distributions. So what comes down to how to choose between Roth versus traditional is when you want the IRS to take its cut from your retirement. Now, when does it make sense to contribute to your Roth account or your traditional account? If I'm in my 20s, 30s, 40s, or just decades away from my normal retirement age at 59 and a half, then I would consider a Roth contribution over a traditional 401k. I also believe the marginal tax rates will go up in the future. And our tax rates right now are really low thanks to Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. But that is set to be expired by the end of 2025. With the declining birth rate and decreasing government revenue from American workers, I personally don't think that the government would have any choice but to change the tax system in the future. Could I be wrong in the future? Absolutely. But do I want to bet my retirement on that? Absolutely not, right? And I would also consider what my retirement income is going to be. Ideally, I would like to stay under 22% in the marginal tax rate. A 12% marginal tax rate would be even better. So if you're about to collect your Social Security retirement pension, and you have to keep in mind that the pension you receive is taxable by the federal and sometimes the state governments. If you're a military retiree, federal government retiree, state government retiree, or you receive some type of pension from the private sector, the pension income you receive is taxable by the IRS. You should calculate how much you'll owe in taxes the day you start receiving your Social Security pension, and how that's going to affect the cost of your Medicare premiums in retirement. Having a Roth account would reduce your overall taxable income during retirement, but having a traditional account could increase your taxable income because the distributions from the traditional account are taxable as well. The other factor is that if you're in your 20s, like I said earlier, your income is typically lower than those in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. And I would take advantage of the low tax bracket and pay the taxes now so I don't have to pay later on in the future. So if my marginal tax rate as a single person is at 12%, making $45,000 a year, then the dollars I contribute to Roth would grow exponentially. Eventually, I'm going to reach 22%, 24%, or maybe even 32% in the income tax bracket because ideally my income is supposed to go up, right? And I strongly encourage you to reach out to your local CPA to find out if you're doing the right thing. Or you can have a chat with me by going to firesightshare.com/coaching. Another option you have is to contribute to both Roth and traditional 401k at the same time. The 401k contribution limit, again, for 2023 is $22,500 or $30,000 if you're over the age of 50. You can contribute to both Roth and traditional as long as you don't exceed the personal contribution limit. And I know people who elect to do 50% Roth and 50% traditional to lower their taxable income. And personally, my tax threshold for Roth is the 32% marginal tax rate. And a lot of people would probably agree with me on this. And let me know in the comment section down below, what is your maximum, like at what point would you contribute into the traditional 401k or something else? My income is not quite there yet, though. I'm not at 32%. But when I reach 32%, I'm going to want to reduce my taxable income by putting some money towards the traditional portion of my 401k. If I'm barely on the edge of the 32%, I'm just going to put some of my gross income in the traditional 401k now. So when I retire later, I can convert it to Roth when my tax rates are a lot lower. So the bottom line is that I would rather pay 22% or 24% in marginal tax rate when I retire than pay 32% in marginal tax rate now, right? And it's really up to you. As long as you have the taxes figured out for your benefit, what really comes down to between Roth and traditional is, do you want to pay taxes now or later? And I want you to download my absolutely free 401k calculator by visiting firesightshare.com/resources. And I'm also going to show you how to calculate your 401k based on your age later on in this live stream. And if you're watching this on replay, you can just go to my 401k YouTube playlist and find the 401k calculator tutorial video. And I'm sure you want to know how much your 401k will grow in the next 10, 20, or 30 years, right? And did you know that some 401k plans allow you to contribute more than the personal contribution limit? And it's called an after-tax contribution. So there's the Roth 401k, traditional 401k, and there's the after-tax 401k contribution. If you take a look at the My Financial Independence Checklist, step 7 is to max out your 401k or other employment or employee retirement account. And step 8 is to achieve a 50% gross savings rate to achieve financial independence and retire early. And I was able to contribute a heck of a lot more money to my 401k in 2017, 2018, and 2019 using the mega backdoor Roth strategy. And why would anyone contribute more to the 401k? My reason was simple, okay? I was so behind on my 401k contributions in 2017 when I was 31 years old. And I had just paid off over $110,000 in consumer debt in 2016. And it took me another 5 months to max out my emergency fund. And I couldn't start maxing out my Roth IRA and 401k contributions until the beginning of 2017 when I completely eliminated my debt and other liabilities. And I achieved financial stability in 2018 when I started saving over 50% of my income towards retirement and early retirement and other investment vehicles. But anyway, this is how a mega backdoor Roth generally works. You need to first check with your employer to see if they give you the option to make after-tax contributions to your 401k. Your maximum contribution limit for the 401k in 2023 is actually $66,000 right here, okay? Or $73,500 if you're over the age of 50. your personal contribution limit that I've been talking about during this live stream is still $22,500 or $30,000 if you're over the age of 50. That part is not going to change, okay, until next year. And your employer contribution can also go into either Roth or traditional 401k with the new 401k law that was just signed by President Biden in 2022. So between the employer contribution and the after-tax contribution, you're going to have $43,500 or $51,000 remaining. They can be from your employer or your after-tax contribution. So if your employer contributes $6,000, then you need to deduct that from either $66,000 or $73,500, depending on your age. But you have to be careful and not miss out on your employer match. If you contribute all $43,500 to your after-tax contribution and $22,500 to your employee contribution, you could miss out on the free employer match. So again, you're going to have to manually calculate how much you get in employer contribution before you making the after-tax contribution. I also wouldn't do the mega backdoor Roth if my 401k doesn't offer what's called the in-plan rollovers to a Roth 401k or in-service withdrawals to a Roth IRA. And I know this is a bit of a complicated process, so just bear with me while I try to explain it as simply as possible. So with the in-plan rollovers right here, okay, what happens is when you make an after-tax contribution, your money can convert from after-tax money to a Roth 401k. So generally, only the portion of the conversion that represents earnings on after-tax money would be subject to ordinary income tax. The 5-year rule also applies to the in-plan rollover from after-tax dollars to Roth dollars. You just have to wait at least 5 years before you can make any withdrawal from that pot of money. What I would prefer to do is make an in-service withdrawal from the 401k after-tax contribution to a Roth IRA. And I did this with my previous employer who had Vanguard managing my 401k at the time. So I basically opened a Roth IRA with Vanguard and have it connected to my 401k. The Roth IRA was much easier because all I had to do was automatically move my after-tax contribution from my 401k to the Roth IRA. And it was like an automatic rollover from 401k to Roth IRA every single year. I didn't owe any taxes on the rollover because I already paid taxes on the after-tax contribution. But unfortunately, only about 27% of 401k employers offer this type of service. And I was really fortunate to have the mega backdoor Roth option so that I could catch up on my 401k contributions for all the years I spent paying off my debts. And if you're a high income earner making $200,000 or more a year in gross income, you should ask your employer if they offer what's called a 401k after-tax contribution. And I trusted Vanguard because that broker has been around for a long time with an excellent track record, right? So in 2017, I contributed a total of $54,000 to my 401k between my personal contribution, employer match, and the after-tax contribution. And in 2018, I contributed a total of $55,000 because the contribution limit increased based on the inflation rate at the time. And in 2019, I contributed a total of $56,000, and my personal contribution was $19,000 that year, and the employer match was around $9,000 in the same year. So I contributed the remaining $28,000 biweekly to the after-tax portion of my 401k. So by the end of 2019, my total contributions without the earnings and interest were $165,000. And I felt pretty comfortable at that point to slow down on my 401k investment because I felt like I caught up a lot at that point, right? And the overall 401k performances between 2017 and 2019 were just incredible. In 2017, I made a 21% return on investments with $54,000. That was a great bull market year, if you guys remember that. And in 2018, the market was doing really well until September when the Federal Reserve, this was back in 2018, the Federal Reserve out of nowhere just raised interest rates. The market just started panicking in September and October which ended the year with a negative 4% return. And I remember, I don't know if you guys remember, let me know in the comment section down below. I remember when Trump yelled at Jerome Powell and told him that he's going to fire him if he doesn't lower the interest rates. And I thought that was pretty funny. But they ended up lowering the interest rates again going into 2019. So when people panicked in 2018, I just bought their shares, right? Because in 2019, the market went sky high. It finished even better than 2017 with a 31% return. And that was just in the S&P 500. But I had other investments in my 401k that still finished with a 31% return. My tech stocks like Tesla and Meta just blew up and gave me some incredible returns. So I ended up finishing that year with over $225,000 between the cost basis, earnings, and dividend reinvestments. That's when I actually paused on the after-tax contribution, because starting in 2020, I just did the maximum employee contribution and got the employer match because I felt like I had too much money tied up in my 401k. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to balance my net worth between my retirement assets, real estate, and cash reserves. And I also felt pretty comfortable that I had accumulated over $200,000 in my 401k in a short period of time to catch up on all the years that I didn't get to invest when I was in debt. And today, I have over 7 figures in total assets thanks to those years when I went very aggressive with my retirement and non-retirement investments. And when people panicked in 2018, when the Federal Reserve raised interest rates, I bought more investment assets. And I was happy to buy their shares. In 2020, when COVID-19 shut down the entire world, I bought more stocks because I knew I was buying those assets at a discount. When the bear market hit in 2022, due to high inflation and the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, I picked up more shares that people didn't want because I understood the long-term growth. Do you honestly think that Apple, Microsoft, Google, Tesla, Berkshire Hathaway, or JP Morgan Chase will go bankrupt? If they all go bankrupt, we're going to have a much bigger problem than the stock market. We would probably be looking at a total economic collapse if the S&P 500 companies file for bankruptcy one by one. The chances of that happening is almost slim to none. Let's talk about how your 401k could potentially turn into millions of dollars over time. And you can download the 401k calculator for absolutely free by visiting firesightchat.com/resources. So let me show you this awesome spreadsheet, right? And if this is your second time being in the live stream, this is my favorite kind of spreadsheet, and it's very easy for you to use. And before I get into the scenario, let me show you how this works, okay? So when you download it, you're not gonna get lost. You can always replay this video if you need to. So right here on the top left corner, you can put your age and put the current balance as of 2023. So you can go back to the statements and look at your 401k balance as of January 1st, 2023. And I'm gonna start with $0 for every scenario. And the gross income I'm gonna start with is $60,000, which is about the national average. And if you make less or more than that, just change that amount here, okay? Don't put overtime or other times in there because a lot of times that you might not be able to contribute that to the 401k. But if your employer allows it, but then feel free to put it in there. And I'm also gonna start with a 6% personal contribution rate. So that means that you're contributing 6% of the $60,000, which is $3,600 in personal contribution, okay? And I'm also gonna add a 3% employee rate of $1,800 in the same calendar year. So it will be 3% of the $60,000 in gross income is coming from your employer as free cash, right? Okay, so I'm also going to assume that the investments will perform a 7% average annual return. That's pretty conservative until retirement. And I'm also going to increase the 401k contribution here by 1% every year starting at age 25. And I'll go from 6% all the way to 15% in 10 years. And I'm going to maintain the 401k contribution to just 15%. I'm also going to assume that your gross income will increase by 2% annually, which means that your employer match will also increase by 2% annually. So by the time you're 34, your total contribution rate should be 15% plus a 3% employer match if it's available to you. Keep in mind that I'm taking the most conservative approach to the 401k contributions and return on investments, okay? But what you really want to do is to save 25% of your gross income towards your retirement. That could be a combination of your 401k, Roth IRA, and HSA. And I teach about the rule of 25, which means you want to save 25 times your planned annual spending saved before you retire. And I also believe you need to save at least 25% of your gross income to retire comfortably. You can check out all of my videos on financial independence and retire early, or the FIRE movement, linked in the description below. Anyway, let's get started on the spreadsheet. Let's assume that your income starts at $60,000. And if you consistently invest until you retire at age 60, you could have almost $1.9 million with a 7% average annual return. Even if you don't get an employer match, you will still end up with $1.5 million. So if you're watching this and you're in your 20s, you're by far in the best position to grow that 401k to at least 7 figures by the time you retire at age 55. Remember that the rule of 55 allows you to withdraw from your 401k penalty-free. But what if you're already making over 6 figures in income in your 20s? If you have the ability to max out your 401k starting at age 25, your 401k could grow exponentially over the years. Not to mention the possibility of retiring earlier because you contributed more in your 20s. So let's assume that the personal contribution limit is going to increase by $500 every single year, okay? And the employer contribution increases by 2% annually, all right? With a 7% average annual return, you ready for this? You could have over $5 million by the time you turn 60 years old. I also added the catch-up contribution right here, starting at the age of 50. But if you look at age 50 here, you're already going to have over $2.2 million if you retire at the age of 50, right? But if you retire early at age 55, you're going to have over $3.4 million. So if you have the budget to maximize your 401k in your 20s, you're going to be able to retire earlier than 60, possibly at 55, and probably never have to worry about running out of money again. Because the other thing is, you could literally stop working here, okay? You could stop working at age 50. And let's say you decide not to contribute anymore and you have other investment assets and at age 50. So you stop contributing at $2.2 million and you say, you know what, I'm done. I'm 50. I'm going to go live my life. And it's still going to continue to grow, assuming that it's a 7% average annual return. And when you're eligible to start collecting at 59 and a half, look at that. You're still going to have over $4.5 million. So what you invest in the early days is going to pay off enormously. Okay. So that's why if you're watching this in your 20s, you have the biggest advantage right now. All right. But let's say you're in your 30s. I'm going to assume that your gross income is $75,000 with the same contribution rate as the 20s. You'll still have over $1.5 million in your 401k by the time you're 60 years old. That's also assuming that you get a 3% employer contribution. Without the employer match, the total will still be around $1.2 million. So if you just consistently save and invest starting at 6%, 7%, 8%, 9%, 10%, and then you do 15%, you're still going to reach over $1.5 million, right? And if you believe you need more than 1.2 or $1.5 million, you'll need to increase your savings rate at the beginning, starting now, okay? Maybe consider increasing it to 10%. Play with the numbers. If you think 10% is too much for your budget, then you're going to need to increase your income. It's as simple as that. So let's say you have pretty good income, okay? Then consider maxing out your contribution every year, because in 25 years, or by the time you're 55 years old, you're going to have over $2.3 million with a 7% average annual return. And by age 60, you could have almost $3.6 million. And I didn't start maximizing my 401k contributions until I was 31. Okay. So if you feel like it's too late, you're not too late. The best time to start investing was yesterday. And the next best time is today. Okay. And if you're in your 40s, assuming that you're making $80,000 a year in gross income, you're going to have to contribute at least 15% of your income towards your 401k to get $1 million by the time you're 60 years old. Okay, that's also including the 3% employer match with a 7% average annual return. Because you're starting in your 40s, you're going to have to consistently increase your contribution rate by 1%. So by the time you're 50, right here, you're going to have to contribute at least 25% of your gross income towards your 401k. And if you can contribute more, the better. Okay. And let's say, and you're going to have a better chance of retiring with over 7 figures in your 401k if you just max out your 401k contribution every year. I'm going to add the catch-up contribution right here in today's dollars at age 50, right here, 7,500. Okay. And you're going to have $1.5 million by the time you're 60 years old. And this also includes the 3% employer contribution. Now, let's say you're in your 50s. Because you're very close to your retirement age, you want to max out your contributions as much as possible with a catch-up contribution. Okay. In 2023, you can contribute up to $30,000 instead of $22,500 because you're at least 50 years old. So if you're dedicated to retiring by 60 here, you're going to have about $600,000 invested in your 401k. It's okay not to hit 7 figures because having $600,000, having something in your 401k is better than nothing. Okay. So having $600,000 in your 401k would still allow you to withdraw up to $24,000 a year with a 4% withdrawal rule. But if you decide to work until you're 65 years old, then you have a higher probability of retiring with at least 7 figures in your 401k. This is not guaranteed though, because your timeline is a lot shorter than everyone else's. So your 401k investments might need to be much more conservative than the 7% right here at average annual return. So like more like 6% or 5%. And don't be discouraged just because you're in your 50s and you don't have much saved in your 401k, because 401k is not the only investment vehicle that you can have to retire at age 60 or 65. You can also invest in a Roth IRA, which allows you to invest an additional $1,000 in catch-up contributions starting at age 50. In 2023, you can contribute up to $7,500 to a Roth IRA. At the same time, you contribute to a 401k. So if you max out both Roth IRA and the 401k in your 50s, that's $37,500 total in personal contributions. Is that going to be enough? It's going to depend entirely on your pensions from Social Security, your job, or other investment assets like real estate. Just keep in mind that your savings rate matters more than the overall investment return. You saw the big difference between contributing 15% of your gross income versus maximizing your contributions. That could be a difference of $1 million versus $5 million if you're in your 20s. I don't know about you, but retiring with $5 million in your 401k sounds pretty sweet. But just because you're late in the game, it doesn't mean that you're not going to score. It's completely up to you how you want your retirement to be. Let's say you quit your job and you have a 401k with your previous employer. Is it ideal to move your old 401k to an IRA or move your old 401k to your new 401k? Let me give you a breakdown of how to decide what's right for you. The rule of any rollover is that you have to leave your employer. You can't make the rollover or combine 2 401ks until you quit your job or get fired by your employer. And according to Bankrate, this is crazy. There are 25 million forgotten 401k accounts at the end of 2021, which is absolutely insane. And CNBC even reported that over 20% of 401k plans are either lost or forgotten. You you could have a few $1,000s or tens of thousands of dollars in there that you forgot about. And Congress passed a law in 2022 to make the 401k lost and found database permanent for the American people. You can just Google 401k lost and found, and it'll take you to the search database to find your 401k. But anyway, let's say you found your 401k. What you need to find out is how much of that is in pre-tax dollars or traditional 401k, and how much of that is in after-tax dollars or Roth 401k. Because traditional 401k is the one that you haven't paid taxes on. They could be your personal contribution or your employer match. So you'll need to either put the money in traditional IRA or traditional 401k for the direct rollover. This is not a taxable event because you're just moving traditional to traditional or pre-tax dollars to pre-tax dollars. If you're moving from one job to another, it's not a bad idea to just move your old 401k to a new 401k. If you're looking to have more investment options and looking to convert your 401k to Roth IRA, then moving it to a traditional IRA might be the right option for you. And for the Roth 401k, because you already pay taxes on them, you can only move it from Roth 401k to a Roth 401k or Roth 401k to a Roth IRA. Again, this is not a taxable event because the government cannot tax you twice. You can't move your Roth account to a traditional account for the same reason. You can't request a tax refund by doing that. It's not a joke because several people have asked me that in the past. However, if you move money from a traditional 401k to a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA, then it becomes a taxable event or what's called a conversion. Anytime you make a conversion, you're going to owe federal income tax and state income tax if you live in a state that requires you to pay state income tax in that year that you make the conversion. And most people don't like doing this when their marginal tax rate is already at 22%, 24% or higher, because let's say you make $10,000 conversion, okay? And you're already at the 24% marginal tax rate, you could owe 24% or 32% in income tax out of that $10,000 conversion. So you could end up paying $2,400 or $3,200 in taxes for that $10,000 conversion that you made. And most people would rather wait until they're in their retirement when their marginal tax rate is at 10% or 12%. Some people don't need to convert at all if they're already retired with a low income. Let me know in the comment section down below if you've done a Roth IRA conversion recently or did a rollover recently, okay? And here are the pros and cons of moving your old 401k to an IRA. The problem I had with my 401k was the high maintenance fees. The 401k plan used to charge me about $70 just in the annual maintenance fee and another 1.1% in expense ratio. So what that means is that for the $100,000 I had invested, the plan was charging me $1,100 a year just to own their select mutual funds. In my IRA, I could invest that money in an index fund with a 0.04% expense ratio, which would only cost about $80 a year. That's a huge difference when it comes to total annualized returns. The other nice thing about the IRA is that you get to consolidate all of your 401k plans into one portfolio. And I used to have multiple 401ks, and I just put them all into an IRA and manage my own investments. The IRA I own now has no account fees, low expense ratios, and provides wider investment options like individual stocks, bonds, ETFs, and index funds. And I can invest in index funds that cost almost nothing to invest. That $2,000 I spent every year just from the 401k management and maintenance fees could turn into $244,000 in 30 years with an 8% average annual return. That was a big selling point for me. It's the cheap and low cost investment options. The downside of rolling it over to your from your 401k to an IRA is that if you work for a company that paid you compensation in company stocks, okay, you will most likely have to roll it over to a taxable brokerage account instead of an IRA. So make sure to talk to a tax consultant before you do that. And the other downside is you lose the rule of 55 if you no longer have the 401k. The rule of 55 is when you leave your job in or after the year you turn 55, you can actually withdraw from your 401k without the 10% penalty. If you're close to the early retirement age, you should map out your retirement plan and find out if it makes sense for you to roll over your 401k to an IRA. Because if you're close to 54, maybe almost at 55, you might not want to close out your 401k because then you're going to lose the rule of 55 if you close it out and move everything to the IRA. Okay. And if someone sues you and wins, the Federal Employment Retirement Income Security Act, that was a mouthful, prevents that person from accessing the funds in your 401k to settle their claims. The IRA, however, does not have the protection except for Arizona, Texas, and Washington at the time I'm recording this video. But there are some exceptions to the bankruptcy lawsuit, so make sure to read your state laws if you're in that type of situation. And if you're above the Roth IRA income limits and you're doing a backdoor Roth IRA, having a balance in your traditional IRA will trigger a pro rata rule or a pro rata conversion from traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. So if you're a high income earner making more than the Roth IRA contribution income limits, remember that having a balance in your traditional IRA could complicate the backdoor Roth IRA conversion process. You can also check out the backdoor Roth IRA video linked in the description below. And here's the pros and cons of moving your old 401k to a new 401k. It's much easier to manage one 401k instead of multiple 401ks. Consolidating your old 401k, your old accounts, means that you will just pay the fees for one 401k instead of multiple 401ks. You probably didn't want to have $50,000 here and $50,000 there, right? And if you're in a high income earner, you can avoid the pro rata rule with the backdoor Roth IRA I mentioned earlier. And you also get to withdraw your 401k at the age of 55 if you retire at 55. The rule of 55 only applies to the 401k and not the IRA. You don't get to withdraw from your IRA penalty-free until you're 59 and a half. If you're planning to work until you're at least 55, the rule of 55 allows you to withdraw from your 401k penalty-free. And it doesn't matter if you quit your job, got laid off, or get fired for any reason, because you're going to be entitled to the penalty-free withdrawal from your 401k. But the downside of moving your old 401k to a new 401k is that you may have limited investment options. The plan administrator or your employer is responsible for the management of the plan. You probably only get to invest in a list of pre-selected investments by the plan administrator in the 401k. That was always the downside of having a 401k. And with the 401k, as I mentioned earlier, it comes with a higher fee than an IRA. And most mutual funds are actively managed, which means they charge more in management expenses than index funds. And the other downside is that if your current employer doesn't offer the Roth option, you can only make the traditional to traditional rollover. You're going to have to move the old Roth 401k to your Roth IRA, or you can just leave your Roth 401k alone. It's up to you. And not all 401k plans will allow you to do an in-kind transfer. Not every one of them, like my daughter says, not everyone is built the same. They're all built different, okay? Your old 401k may have some mutual funds that your new 401k does not have. If that's the case, you're going to have to liquidate your old 401k and then move it to the new 401k. And you don't need to make a decision right now or right away. Take some time to decide what you should do with your old 401k. But whatever you do, please do not cash out of your 401k early, because you're going to end up paying a 10% penalty and federal and state income taxes. So what matters more is what you're doing with your current 401k. Are you getting an employer match? Are you maximizing your contributions? And does your 401k allow you to invest extra money with after-tax contributions? Because if you watch the previous segment of this live stream, I talked about the power of compound interest and how much it can grow over the years. I am maxing out my retirement contributions every single year because I know how powerful these dollars will become in the next 10, 20, or 30 years. Do I care what happens in the stock market in the short term? Absolutely not. Would I care if I'm close to my retirement age? Of course I will. My risk tolerance will remain the same until I'm in my 50s. I'm going to stay debt free and continue to invest at least 25 or 30% of my income towards my retirement. And this has been another beast of a video, and I hope you got a lot out of it.